Reports from Indonesia were more startling than we expected. PT2 Series Part 1. Jer, we need to get back and put you in quarantine. Now, Damati looked pale. Aye. I'm going to end up ... like them. No you're not, have some sense. We don't know if it's airborne. That was a lie, I know, but I didn't know what else to tell a doomed man. At that moment, we heard a series of popping coming from the trees, and a flock of birds flew from the palms. The escarps had ruptured on some of the corpses hanging from the trees, and a putrid-smelling cloud of orange began to diffuse into the air. The birds, having flown in the cloud, began to fall from the sky. Damati bolted for the road. I quickly followed. We got to the checkpoint when Damati began to lose his breath. He staggered forward before falling face forward. The soldiers aimed their rifles and were barking at us in Indonesian. Doctor, Damati, are you okay? He vomited before putting a hand up to brush me away. Please, he wheezed between chokes, leave me be. Go, tell others. At this point, Dr. Damati began to seize, and in a frenzy began to rip off the hazmat, then his clothes. The soldiers scurried back, terrified, and pointed their weapons at Damati. I remembered that they were shouting, Pennyakadasam, Pennyakadasam. Dr. Damati continued to seize for 10 seconds, his back thrashing back and forth and his eyes rolling back, drool pooling out of his mouth. The soldiers shouted, then fired a shot. Crack, right in the leg. He abruptly stopped and laid still. Dr. Damati. I turned him around to see if he was responsive. His face was contorted in pain, but he did not respond. Then I noticed a tiny change take place where the bullet had struck. It didn't bleed. Right where the bullet entered his body was emerged a yellow dot that grew bigger. I stepped back in repulsion. In rapid motion, the dot grew into fingers that protruded like a snake, growing until it was nearly a foot out of his gunshot wound. His torso began to move and expand like a balloon until the tearing of skin revealed those monstrous tendrils of orange sprouting forth from my colleague's body. The soldiers held me until a medevac helicopter could arrive at a field nearby. I sat there, the soldiers a good 30 feet away, staring at the body of Jer Damati. He was 43. When I got back to my hotel in Jakarta, I knew what I had to do. First, I had to make a difficult phone call to the family of Jer Damati, and since I didn't speak Indonesian, I didn't think they really understood me. Next, I had to warn people. This thing evolved so quickly, Lisa, and the speed at which it proliferates is like something from a B-movie horror film. I urgently gave them the account I just gave you, then sent the CDC some pictures of the orangutans with the fungi as well as the data that Dr. Damati had sent me previously. I waited in that hotel room anxiously, staring out into the busy traffic street below. Mopeds and bikes went by, all these people oblivious to the fact that just 90 miles away in the jungle lay something of unspeakable horror. My phone rang and I picked up. It was Dr. Mike Haynes, from your thesis defense, who now heads the mycotics disease branch of the CDC. Mike, you need to get your folks on this, ASAP. Well, Greg, cordyceps that infect, what, mammals, humans, you know how improbable that sounds. Yes, Mike, but I am telling you, I saw it. My friend, Dr. Jer Damati. Greg, we're talking about a massive phylum-sized jump of a fungus from insects to mammals. I looked at the pictures. Greg, I think you're jumping to conclusions there. Those could be a variety of other suspects. You had to jump to cordyceps. Mike, did you look at the nuclear ribosomal data from Damati? I don't need to. Mike, this ... this is science fiction. The mammalian physiology ... it just wouldn't support a fungal infection to the extent you're claiming. Did you drink the water there or something, Greg? I tell this to my colleagues and I will become a laughingstock. We talked for a few more minutes as I desperately tried to get him to take me seriously, but I failed. He hung up and I tried to call every reputable mycologist, animal physiologist, and entomologist that I knew. They all responded with similar levels of incredulity. I prayed like I never did before in my life that thing does not come out of the jungle. Given what happened to Badu Kesu an entire village, in the span of a week ... it chills me to my core to think what would happen to a city like Samarinda, or even Jakarta. Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world population-wise. This is a ticking time bomb, and we need to get it contained, or the consequences will be catastrophic and hellish. I will set up a meeting with the Ministry of Health tomorrow. Warmly, Greg. Another email, a day after. Lisa, the meeting was a disaster. The Director General of the Indonesian equivalent of the CDC, Dr. Adi Makmur, MD, practically laughed in my face, accusing me of being a victim of old wives' tales from the jungle backwaters. Nobody is listening. I hope that at least you can believe me, Lisa, even when I can barely believe myself. I am leaving Jakarta for Oakland tomorrow, but I haven't slept for days. I am simply exhausted. Greg. At this point, my MacBook had died. I grunted in frustration, pulled out my iPhone, and proceeded to check if the signal had come back on my phone as well. It did. I proceeded to check the email from there. The next email came a week later. It was a blank email with the subject in all caps. Subject, goodbye. It has started. Just in the middle of downloading, I heard the long blast of the ship's horn. The ship had arrived at Ushuaia.